1. A couple of years ago, I got a job as a security officer at a resort with an indoor water park on the overnight shift. During my training there, the night manager, John, told me about how the hotel was one of the last places that a child was seen alive before disappearing. Can't go into too many details as the hotel has reopened under a new name. Now, I was more of a skeptic round about this time, so I didn't really believe John, and I went about my training. A little later, I began to hear a loud tapping noise at one section of the resort, which sounded like someone tapping on the ductwork in the hallway. I showed one of the hotel engineers, but they were not sure what was causing the tapping sound. Not long after first hearing the tapping, I was checking the hotel fire extinguishers during one shift. One extinguisher was near an emergency exit inside the lower restaurant. The exit door only had a handle on the inside of the door and couldn't be opened from the exterior. That's when there was a loud slamming sound against the door in the dark restaurant. Startled, but thinking that someone was playing a prank, I opened the door to new fallen snow but found no footprints going to or from the door. Another time, in the lower restaurant's kitchen, I was walking towards the door into the dining area when I saw something the staff reported for years. A tall shadow figure sliding along the wall through the swinging door. I turned around and walked straight back to the office. I left for a while but returned. Upon returning, my old shift partner and I started to test this entity. Likely multiple, but a bad idea nonetheless. We would sit in the hotel spa and wait for stuff to happen. I felt a coldness touch my elbow. In one of the rooms, witnessed a shadow figure peer out of a separate room before disappearing back behind the doorframe when I noticed the figure. A few days later, we heard two voices, one a female, childlike voice and the other deeper, almost demonic-like, and a set of loud footsteps going up the stairs, but found no one inside the entry spa after clearing it. Though it was interesting to challenge whatever permanently inhabited the hotel, it would have consequences. Fast forward a month or two, the hotel was officially closed after being bought out by a competitor. As security staff, we were given 60 days of extended employment under the law. This meant working alone in the middle of the night in an empty building with what seemed to be multiple entities. It all started with random banging sounds that echoed through the halls, including the time that my old shift partner and I heard what sounded like a bowling ball falling down the stairs. Two police officers saw an old foot warmer violently shake inside the lower restaurant. One refused to check on me afterward. The same location that I would later see a floating grey mass. There were 2 times that I heard a loud, childlike scream emanating from the restaurant. I never did investigate either instance as I was alone and unarmed, with no way to easily call for help. Finally, I began to see shadows inside the water park. These would show up in various locations on the child's splash tower, but one watched me start my patrols one night. After hearing a loud bang, I looked up to the slide tower to see a solid black mass. Looked like a pair of head and shoulders, staring down at me as I walked through the park. I haven't returned to that property either, as an employee or a guest. 2. This occurred in late August this year. My family and some friends had gone away to Norfolk for a few days. Me and most of my friends stayed on a campsite, but 2 of my friends, altogether there were 6 of us, stayed on a separate site. They had a trailer tent at the time, and the site we stayed on didn't allow trailer tents, but the other one did. That was separated from ours by about 500 meters of woods with a single path running through the middle of it to connect them. We'd been to this site with my friends many times and had walked through those woods late at night on the way back from their site. Quite often we would go to their site in the evening and had experienced nothing. Not heard or seen anything strange. Sure, it had been scary, as all we had was some torches, but once you got about 100 meters down the track, you could see the lights of the other side, so it had always felt safe. Because of this, we'd never been reluctant to spend time in the forests. During the day, we used to explore the forest. Many other kids had made dens in there, so we had fun finding them. This time, it must have been about 8 p.m., and we were playing manhunt. It wasn't dark yet, but we couldn't see very far into the forest by this time. We'd planned to head back to one of the sites after we'd finished this game. So after the frantic rush to find somewhere to hide, I chose to hide under a small tree and bush thing. It was about 10 meters away from the main path, and my friend's campsite was about 50 meters down the path. I sat myself down and faced the path. My back was to the forest. One of my friends had ran in front of me to hide up a nearby tree, maybe 15 meters in front of me. I didn't know where everyone was at this point. The game played out mostly like normal. I'd heard the person who was on get 3 out of 5 people hiding. It was just me and my friend who was up the tree. The last time I had heard anyone else move was when they were chasing each other in the opposite direction to where I was. I'd been sat there in silence for about 15 minutes, and I was about ready to give up and call out to end the game. It was then I heard noises. It sounded like someone whispering in a low voice. I couldn't hear what was being said, but I assumed it was the rest of my friends who had somehow snuck up on me. The noises came from behind me, so I was about ready to get up from where I was sat and call it a day. I wasn't sure what stopped me doing it at the time, but I didn't get up. The noises continued for another 45 seconds. I didn't hear what I thought at the time was my friends walk away, but I was sure there was nobody there at that point. I stood up and called out. The first to respond was my friend who was up the tree. Next was everyone else about 15 seconds later, who were in a group and came down the path to where we were from the opposite side, to the one I was next to. If I had thought it was weird how they moved so fast without me hearing them, I didn't say at the time. After this, we called it a day and went back to the nearest site, which was where everyone else was at the time. On the way back, the person who'd been hiding up the tree asked me if I'd been talking to myself just before I'd gotten up and shouted, because he'd heard a voice. This really had me shaken up, and my friend noticed too. I explained to him that I'd heard voices just before I called out too, and assumed it was the people who were up looking for us. However, he confirmed that they were not behind me at that time, and in fact, nobody had been near us during the whole time we'd been playing. Not wanting to scare the younger ones around us, 2 of my friends had brothers who were 10 and 8. We played it off as the trees brushing against each other in the wind. After we'd gotten back and the younger ones had gone to bed, we brought it back up with my other 2 friends. Neither of them recall hearing voices during the game, which was a relief in some ways. We laughed it off, as we had earlier. The next day I did some research and didn't find anything that related to what happened, and me and the other friend who heard the voices agreed that it must have just been the trees, or some kind of woodland creature. I'd appreciate if you could give me some ideas on what it was. I'm quite skeptical of the paranormal as a whole, so I'd like to believe this has some logical explanation. But I'd appreciate any input I can get. Thank you for taking the time to listen. 3. I could use some advice on some things I've been seeing and hearing at night recently. A few months ago I was living in a different apartment, and I had a really surreal experience one night when I was alone and sleeping. For some reason I had woken up and rolled over to face the wall perpendicular to my bed, to see half of a shadow figure fading on the wall in a pose, looking like it was about to grab me. I didn't think anything of it, but it made my hair stand a little, but I fell back asleep, and didn't really think about it again until recently. So I moved back home from college not too long ago, and I've been staying in my mother's living room on an inflatable mattress. About a week ago, I again found myself waking up in the middle of the night. Only this time it felt like my heart was pounding out of my chest, to the point I felt like I was vibrating. Then it started to feel like someone was grabbing my arms and legs and just squeezing them up and down. It wasn't painful, but it felt like the kind of squeeze you give someone when you want attention. I opened my eyes to see a dark silhouette of a head literally lingering over me, before fading away like it was being traced out of existence. The thing was, I still had the sensation I was vibrating and being grabbed after it disappeared. So I checked my pulse, and it wasn't where that heavy and fast heartbeat vibrating feeling was coming from. I ended up rolling over on my side to see if the feeling of being grabbed would stop, and it did. And I fell back asleep. I didn't feel cold or like my hair was standing up in this situation, nor did I feel like I was in danger. But before I fell back asleep, I heard a couple of creaks and fumbles around the living room and kitchen. Then last night I woke up in the middle of the night again to a loud crash in the kitchen, and I found Tupperware on the ground, which may or may not have been my fault, since I remember moving those specific pieces earlier in the evening. Then as I tried to fall back asleep, I got that feeling that something was running up to me, but I didn't hear any footsteps or anything. But it still kind of started to freak me out. So now here I am, wondering if I should be worried or if it's all in my head. I've entertained the idea of sleep paralysis and night terrors, but I'm not sure what's going on, and was wondering if anyone here could give me advice. Thank you. 4. I'm not really sure how or where to start, but I'll do my best. This all has happened in the same house, my grandmother's house. When I was a kid, my great-grandmother died in my grandmother's house. I was laying with her in the bed when she passed. A few years later, I apparently went to my mum, still as a kid, and told her something very personal about my great-grandmother, but neither me or her can remember what I said. As a teen, I had a few run-ins with what I think were spirits in my grandmother's house. Weird feelings, hearing footsteps when everyone else is asleep. I even believe I heard my name called at one point. I'm a young adult now, living in my grandmother's house, and the activity I've been experiencing has become so much more frequent. Now I'm having experiences every few days. When she was alive, she used to wake me up by tickling my feet. I felt the exact same sensation when I'm laying in bed. I feel sometimes like someone's watching me. I've had doors open and close around me when I'm walking from one room to another. I felt breezes when all doors and windows are shut. Sometimes I even feel sudden changes in temperature, mostly cold, and I get shivers up my spine. Sometimes I feel hands on my body, like someone's standing behind me, with their hand on my back. Probably the most distressing experience happened a few days ago. I was sitting in one of the lounge rooms, facing double doors. It was around 1:30 a.m. A few times when I looked up from my laptop, I saw a person dressed in pale clothing, walking from left to right. Then, from right to left on the other side of the doors. All my family are in bed around 10:30. I know it could have been someone in the family, but there was some sinking feeling telling me it wasn't. It's probably unrelated, but sometimes my dog starts staring at nothing and he gets all skittish. I'm pretty skeptical and logical when it comes to the paranormal. I'll try and debunk something before I start to believe it. I've had other experiences outside of my family home too. One night I was sleeping with my then boyfriend. I woke up in the middle of the night to a woman dressed in black standing by the bed. I've had experiences, but I don't really have any knowledge about spirits or the paranormal aside from that. So I want people's opinion. Should I reach out and try to contact my grandmother? Do you think it's my great-grandmother? What would be my first steps in contacting whoever it is? 5. I firmly believe that there are many unexplained things in this world. You know, the things we have a hard time discussing with others because you don't want to be labeled as crazy. But you know we're there all the same. My dad's house, I believe, contains such an entity. There really isn't one big story to tell, but rather a bunch of small ones that combine into something really hard to write off as sheer coincidence. Most of these are told from my dad's perspective, although I was able to experience one for myself. I was spending the night at my dad's house one time, and we were all in the living room watching TV. My little sister was sitting on the couch with my dad and stepmom, and I was sitting in the recliner with one of the dogs. The other dog was laying in front of the couch. In between the couch and the recliner was an end table, and sitting on the table was a glass box that my stepmom got from her mom. We were paying it no mind when we heard a crash. We weren't expecting it, so we all jumped. The glass box on the end of the table had fallen off the back side of the table and broke. The glass box had been sitting a good distance away from the edge, so it couldn't have fallen on its own. No one was close enough to bump the table. It was like someone lightly pushed the box off the edge, like what a cat would do. We investigated for several minutes before chalking it up to another one of those incidents. My dad was standing in the middle of the living room watching the TV. It was in the middle of the day, and he was the only one home at the time. Suddenly, from the direction of his and my stepmom's bedroom, he heard a loud and deep ha. His first thought was that someone had broken into his house, so he ran in there ready to beat the daylights out of the intruder, only to find an empty room. He looked around for a while and didn't find anyone there. Another time, my dad was in the living room again. It was just him and the dogs. He got up to grab the remote, and he made a comment, the kind you make when you think out loud. Then he heard someone hiss, "Silence," into his ear. My dad, the king of underreactions, simply grabbed the remote and on his way back to the chair says, "How about you shut the fuck up?" He didn't hear anything else the rest of the day. One night when my dad and stepmom had just gotten in bed, they just pulled the sheets over them, the door that leads to their bathroom shook. I'm not talking about some mild shaking that may come with an old house. It was like someone had took hold of the door itself and was violently trying to shake it off its hinges. Needless to say, my stepmom was glad my dad wasn't working nights that night. Along with these things, there are some shadow people sightings, made by both my dad and my little sister. One time, the middle of the day again, my dad was in the kitchen watching one of his football shows. Something compelled him to look toward the entrance of the kitchen, and he saw shadowy, disembodied feet walk across the entrance. My dad, once again the king of underreactions, looked out the kitchen. When he saw nothing, he shrugged his shoulders and went back to his football. This sighting is something that both my dad and little sister swore up and down they saw. On the right back corner of the living room there is a very short hallway with 3 doors. A door to the bathroom, a door to my room, and a door to what used to be my sister's room but is now used for storage. The 2 bedroom doors are on the right side with the bathroom door right in front of them. You can see the bedroom doors from the living room. They saw a shadow figure leave the bathroom and head into the storage room. That being said, the storage room seems to be where this thing dwells when it isn't bothering my family. It's to the point that my sister refuses to ever go into that room again. And even just walking past that room is enough to cause your hairs to stand on end. I could go on for hours, but I'm stopping here. If you have any idea of what we're dealing with, please let me know. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Paranormal Stories, episode 164. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Right, this is outro number 2, because I listened back to the first one. It was long, filled with feelings, and I sounded like a colossal wanker. I was just grumbling about the local supermarkets, and most of them seem to be doing it now. Getting rid of the option to have your groceries bagged for the convenience, which I actually approve of. Oh, hang on. You can hear the dogs in the background there. That's the revenge for all the fireworks that were being let off tonight. Not by me, just by everybody else. The poor little things were probably terrified. Anyway, yeah, which I approve of. I approve of recycling. I approve of reducing the use of things that are wasteful. But I don't approve of throwing out babies with bathwater. Specifically, I'm talking about for home deliveries or store pickup. You can't get rid of something which people require and not replace it with a viable alternative. And that was essentially, and is essentially, my only gripe with the idea of doing it. Well, grumble over. Okay, where are we now? Well, I'm recording this early. This is Tuesday, well, heading into Wednesday, really. Right, so you guys will get this on Friday. I have a little side project to work on as a surprise for a subscriber. I can't go into much detail about it. I've got until, I think, near the end of next week before I need to get it done, so let me check. Yes, I'll do it on Sunday, just to make sure I can get it to the people it needs to be at. And, right, so that's one glitch monthly. I'll have another one to get out by the end of the month. And I think there's anything else. I'll probably want to do something for Christmas, but there's no other major projects at the moment. So that's good. The only other project I need to do actually is to try and get a week off at Christmas, but we'll worry about that when we're in December. Okay, with that I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.